1984 is a dystopian novel that tells of the worst possible future. However, we have already arrived there. In the United States, our government has tortured people as the Ministry of Truth does in 1984, and our government has tried to cover it up. Luckily, photos were eventually released and the truth was revealed. Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib are examples of our merciless desire for power. In these illegal prisons, people were held without a trial and were tortured extensively. There is a staggering amount of similarities between these prisons and George Orwell's 1984. In this novel, Winston was beaten till he could hardly stand, then flung like a sack of potatoes onto the stone floor of a cell. Prisoner beatings were common in Guantanamo Bay, as well as many other types of torture, including starvation, something that arises in 1984 when Winston sees a man who is dying of starvation. Some experts, such as U.S. Attorney General Alberto R. Gonzales, among others, ask the question, in the war on terror, who counts as a person? The same type of existential calamity arises when Winston tells Julia, "We are not human." Winston also tells her, "We are the dead." This is sadly the case for some of the captains of Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib. These illegal prisons started after Al-Qaeda terrorists killed 2,996 people on September 11, 2001. 7 days later, the U.S. Justice Department allowed non-citizens to be detained without a trial for a reasonable amount of time. On January 11, 2002, 20 people were brought to Guantanamo Bay. They started being tortured for interrogation purposes. On March 14, 2003, the Pentagon approved of physical and psychological stress methods for these interrogations. One of these methods included waterboarding. On April 28, 2004, the CIA is informed of what had been happening as photos of the detainees being tortured were released. However, in November of 2005, the CIA destroys evidence of extreme torture used and denies it ever existed, just as the Ministry of Truth in 1984 changes history. They do not acknowledge that the evidence existed until 4 months later. When Obama becomes president in 2009, he makes promises that Guantanamo Bay will be closed within a year. Close to 2 years later, 136 prisoners were left. Today, Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib are shut down, but similar problems of abuse are reported in U.S. immigrant detention camps, where over half the people are held for over 2 years, and complaints of medical neglect and abuse, hunger strike, solitary confinement, family abuse, cleanliness issues, and sexual issues, among other things, have arisen. All of these conditions were also present in Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay. These illegal prisons operated outside the UN Convention Against Torture and the Geneva Conventions, both of which were signed by the United States. To extrude information from prisoners, they used techniques that included sleep deprivation, waterboarding, exposure to extreme temperatures nude, breaking chemical lights and pouring them onto prisoners, heavy beatings, which were sometimes fatal, raping, sexual humiliation, daunting prisoners with dogs, taking away basic needs for survival, taking family members as hostages and threatening to kill them, simulated executions, stress positions such as hanging prisoners by their wrists or arms, sensory deprivation, hooding, stripping, death threats, solitary confinement, strobe lighting, excessively loud music, and electric shock, among countless other things. When one prisoner, Al-Jamadi, who was never proven guilty, died because of this torture, his body was left overnight, and when 2 guards came across the body, they stopped to take pictures, and one guard, last name Harmon, gave a thumbs up in one of the photographs. President Bush said that this torture was the result of a few American troops who dishonored our country and disregarded our values, but many suggest otherwise. Many of the guards seemed to be enjoying the power that the exercise of torture gave them, and it was done for sport by prison guards. The problem lies deeper than dishonoring the United States or a mix-up of laws. It lies in humans' desire for power and control. This trend has been repeated throughout history. In World War II, we held Japanese prisoners in concentration camps. In 2001, we held Islamic prisoners in Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay. Today, we hold mainly Mexican and other Central American immigrants in detention camps. And in the future, our xenophobia will lead us to hold others in these horrific conditions. When we change our laws and sign more treaties to make this more illegal, to make the consequences greater, we don't accomplish anything besides keeping secrets and repeating the circle of history. In 1905, George Santayana famously said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." That is our future if we do not change our outlook on life. If we do not teach our children, and if we do not learn ourselves to not always need to be in control of those we do not like, the torture camps will not be necessary to punish people anymore. To make sure other torture tragedies such as this do not happen again, we need to have more communication throughout the different sections of the government. We also need the government to become more visible to everyday people, as we currently follow the trend present in 1984 of hiding things from ourselves and the people we love.